Good morning, Miss Carlton's class. I hope everyone is safe and sound. I miss seeing your faces, but I was very glad that we all got to come together last week and do our shared class read aloud, and then I got to meet all of your pets on camera. So welcome back to a brand new week, and we have a new text called The Science of Sibling Relationships. So you have your student-guided practice books close by. Hopefully you can grab those resources because we're going to spend some time today with the text that you find on page 185. So I'll give you a second. You can pause the video if you need to find your student books and get it turned to page 185 before we begin. All right, so let's go over a little bit about what we're doing today. So first, our first job today is we're going to preview this text before we read it. And you guys remember when we preview a text, GVS, graphics, vocab, and structure. So we're going to start with that work today. Then we're going to continue our work in small groups later this week, where we will learn how to use text structure and text features. And then we're going to be focusing on that concept of synthesizing elements. Remember, that's our big skill that we are using with this unit. Our last text, we worked on identifying the author's purpose and perspective. This text, we're going to be focusing on that second one there, combining and corroborating different ideas. So we're going to be looking at how the ideas in a piece work together. So remember, for this unit, our essential question was, how can you convince others that disagreement is either useful or that it should be avoided? And if you remember, last week we spent some time on our chat feature talking about whether or not a disagreement can ever be a good thing. So we talked about what disagreements were and how sometimes they can help us to clear the air, or sometimes when you're being misunderstood, being able to discuss that is a way that you can make sure that you can go back to being friends again. So as you read through our piece, as we work through this week, remember, you're going to keep that essential question in the back of your head. Okay, so here we go. Let's get started. So you should see the picture of this text on page 185. If not, you can just join us right here and looking at the screen. So I'm going to have you take a look right there, and I want you to think about that picture, the picture at the very top of that page. What does that photo tell us about the kids? I want you to also zoom in and look at that text feature, which you guys already know, that kind of subtitle there, because we know that that text looks different than the rest of the text. It's in bright blue. What does this text in blue tell us about the article? And then finally, I want you to zoom in and look just at the title. What does the title of the article tell us that we might be getting into? So you can go ahead and take a look also at the second picture that is associated with this article. These are two different kinds of relationships. What is the same and what is different about these two pictures? So you see, one was from the top of the article, one is from the back side of that article. What is the same and what is different? So my friends, you can hop on over to your virtual classroom and you can answer those questions. I have them all set up, and we would love to see you hop on there before our small group meetings this week so that you've had the opportunity to consider those questions. You'll find the actual images in there as well, but if you have your book close by, that will be very helpful. Okay, so before we read, another thing that we need to consider is the structure of the text. So we've been talking a lot about text structure and how that can help us understand or make meaning, especially when in advance we can use those text features to help us. So today's text structure is an example of a description. And if you remember, that's where we have one key idea and then multiple details that support that main idea. So that means our work is going to be to figure out what is that key idea. And my friends, remember our trick that we've learned is that often the title, the subtitle, and the photos or illustrations help already tell us what that key idea is going to be. So as we get into our small groups, that's going to be one of my key questions to ask you. What do you think the key idea will be based on your previewing of the text? Okay, real quick before we wrap up with our video class for today, I want to go over 3 key words and phrases that you're going to see in this article. And chances are you've heard some of these before. So the first one is conflict. Conflict. Now, we have studied the root con before, which we know means against or disagreement. So conflict, a group has a conflict or a disagreement. You can see the sample sentence here over when we would meet. Now, you remember we've been talking about disagreements as part of this entire unit. So the word conflict fits right in there. The second word is exaggerate. And I want you guys to say that with me. Exaggerate. And you can do it with exaggerated hands. Miss Carlton can be exaggerated with her gestures. And you know, sometimes I'll even hit myself in the face with my own hands when I'm talking sometimes. Exaggeration means to describe something as bigger or larger or louder than it really is. We know a literary term for that called hyperbole. See if you can go back in your brains to when we learned that earlier this year. So when we see this in the text, it means that somebody is making it bigger or larger than it really is. Now, my friends, I'm going to give you a question to think about between now and our small group class this week. I want you to think about when somebody exaggerates something, are they telling the truth? If you exaggerate what happened, are you telling the truth? I want you to think about that as you read through the text, but also before our next class. And then finally, the last vocabulary is a phrase. It's called trial and error. And so the word trial can have multiple meanings. The word error, you guys probably know from things like your spelling test or your math class. But the phrase trial and error means something very specific. It's the process of experimenting to try to find the most successful way to do something. So through trial and error, we figured out which pencil sharpener in our classroom was the one that gave the best sharpened pencils. We tried different versions and we figured out the one that ate all the pencils and we got rid of that one. We use trial and error. And again, that's a phrase that means experimenting until you find what works for you. So our 3 vocabulary words again are conflict, exaggerate, and trial and error. You're going to look to see those in the text as we read as well. So you can find those 3 vocabulary words on page 186. And in that notes section, I want you to either draw me a picture or give me an example from your life of how you might use that word today. So I'll take either a picture or an example from your life today of how the words conflict, exaggerate, and trial and error play into what you're doing. And you can find that in your books on page 186. All right, so we are going to start with just a quick little preview read. We're just going to read just the beginning of this text. I want you to have an idea when you come to small group what it might be about. So if you will join me, you can find this on page 185 of your student books, or you can read it right here along with us on the screen because I think you should be able to see that. Brothers and sisters shape each other in countless ways. Remember, that's that subtitle. It was a single bounce of a tennis ball that made me a better sibling. It made me a better person, too. The ball bounced many years ago. I was in 4th grade, and my younger brother, Bruce, was in 2nd grade. Bruce and I were at home. We were playing a game that involved bouncing the tennis ball off our basement wall. And I'll pause right there and say, I know that game. We used to play that game against our garage door, my little sister and I. At one point, when Bruce was about to begin his turn, I turned away. And when I turned back, I caught his eye and immediately saw guilt there. A wordless conversation played out. So my friends, those of you with siblings at home, and if you don't have a sibling at home, you probably have a cousin or a family friend that's almost like a sibling to you. Have you ever had one of those wordless conversations where you look each other in the eye from across the room and you know what the other person is thinking? Maybe you've had it with one of our friends in class. I want you to think about what could Bruce have done that he would have felt guilty about? And how would that make him a better sibling? So this next section of the text, you'll notice it's in that kind of blue scribble. Something different is happening with that text. There are so many things that are different here. And when we come together in small group, I want to talk about all the things that you notice about this blue text right here that are different. How does this look physically different on the page, and what information does it give us as a reader? So your independent work, what you're going to be doing between now and your small group instruction meeting, is to answer those pre-reading questions in our virtual classroom space. And again, just a sentence or so, asking you to take a look at the pictures and the title. So just 3 questions that we want to give you a chance to kind of dig into the text before we read. Because remember, reading before reading is how we are successful. The second independent assignment is for you to finish reading the text. And you have a choice here. You can choose to read the text to yourself. You can read the text to a friend. You can read the text with a friend, or you can listen to the audio, which you'll also find in our virtual classroom space. So when you join your small group this week, we will continue with our work with the science of sibling relationships. I've got some questions I'm going to want to hear from you. And we will have you guys have read the text that you'll find on page 185. We will see you again soon, my friends. Bye-bye.